The aliens had come to the Sol system expecting nothing. To them, it was just another old, dead set of planets orbiting a tired sun. They had heard stories of Earth, a world that had once been home to a curious species called humans, but according to their records, humanity had disappeared 500,000 years ago. The aliens were sure there was nothing left here that could matter. Commander Alan Brooks stood quietly at the edge of the observation deck, watching the blue-green marble of the Earth turn slowly beneath the fleet of alien ships. Alan was one of the few humans who had been allowed to travel beyond the remnants of his own planet. He was small, quiet, and not very imposing, but he had spent his life studying human history, piecing together what his ancestors had left behind. To the aliens, he was just a curiosity, a minor scholar who could translate old texts and provide background information. No one really listened to him when he spoke. "There is nothing here," said Admiral Chiron, a tall, gray-skinned alien with many eyes that rotated independently. "These planets are dead. The humans are gone. We can sweep the area and leave. This mission is just a formality." Alan shook his head slightly, but he did not speak. He had learned long ago that arguing with beings who had never lived on Earth was pointless. Instead, he quietly studied the data streaming in from the fleet's sensors. Something did not feel right. The energy readings from the planets were faint, but they were not random. They were arranged in patterns. Deep beneath the surface, beneath the deserts, the oceans, and even the thick ice of the poles, there were massive structures that hummed with power. "It is probably just old mining installations," said another alien, a short, round creature with multiple arms named Groban. He waved one hand over a holographic display showing the massive ruins scattered across Earth and its moon. "Primitive machines, nothing to worry about." Alan pressed his lips together. The readings did not match what a mining installation would leave behind. These machines were too large, too precise, and too synchronized. They were built not for labor, but for something else. He thought of the stories he had read as a child about the human fleets that had once sailed the stars, stories passed down in fragments, half legend and half history. His heart beat faster as he realized that perhaps those stories were not just tales. The aliens began landing smaller exploration teams on the surface. They drilled through the crust, opening old, sealed chambers. Alan followed quietly, keeping a safe distance as the aliens poked and prodded at the ancient machines. The first chamber they opened was enormous. It stretched hundreds of meters into the ground, filled with huge metal shapes that looked like ships. The aliens gasped in disbelief. Some of the ships were larger than any starship in their current fleets. "Impressive, but still useless," said Admiral Chiron. "They are not moving, they are not active, they pose no threat." Alan looked closer. The ships were covered in dust and layers of hardened mineral, but underneath their hulls shone with a dull silver light. There were lines of tiny openings along the sides, like the veins of a living creature. Alan ran his fingers over a control panel embedded in the wall, half buried under rock. Strange symbols glowed faintly under his touch. The symbols were familiar. They were human. "What are you doing, human?" Groban asked, reaching over with a curious hand. "You are touching old trash." Alan did not answer. He felt something awaken inside him. A memory passed down in stories, a warning from the humans who had built these things. Never underestimate what you cannot see. Never assume something is gone just because it sleeps. He studied the ships, tracing the patterns of the power lines and conduits, and realized that the ships were connected to each other. They were not separate. They were a network, a fleet. As the aliens continued their inspection, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. The tremor was small, almost unnoticeable, but Alan felt it immediately. The aliens ignored it at first, thinking it was just tectonic movement. But then one of the smaller ships began to hum. A faint vibration ran along its hull. Lights flickered on inside the vessel, tiny at first, then brighter as if the ship were waking from a long sleep. "What is that?" asked Groban, a note of alarm in his voice. Alan's heart raced. He had known this moment would come. He turned to the aliens, his voice calm but urgent. "You do not understand. These are not mining machines. They are ships. They are alive in a way you do not understand. Humans built them to last. Humans built them to wait." Chiron laughed, but it was nervous. "Wait. Wait for what? There is nothing here. The humans are gone." Alan shook his head. "That is what they want you to think. They planned for this. They planned for their absence. They built their fleet to survive until the galaxy forgot them. And now it is beginning to wake." The small ship in front of them vibrated more strongly. Its hull opened slightly, revealing rows of sleek lines and weapons that looked sharp and precise. The aliens stepped back instinctively. Some of them whispered nervously to each other, realizing that Alan might be right. "This is impossible," said one of the alien engineers. "Technology this advanced, it is from a civilization that should not have lasted more than 10,000 years, yet here it is, 500,000 years later." Alan smiled faintly. He did not feel pride exactly. It was more like recognition. The humans who had built these ships had known that someday beings like these aliens might come, thinking the Earth was empty. The humans had left a message: do not assume that absence is weakness. Do not assume that death means defeat. As the hours passed, more ships began to show signs of life. Subtle movements, lights blinking in patterns, power lines beginning to hum. The aliens grew uneasy. They had not expected this. They had thought they were visiting a dead world, a world of ruins. Instead, they were standing among the remnants of a sleeping army. Alan moved closer to the largest vessel, the one buried deepest beneath the crust. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of any of the alien dreadnoughts. He ran his fingers over the cold metal, feeling the strange pulse of energy beneath the surface. The ship seemed to respond to his touch, faint vibrations running through the ground like the heartbeat of a long-forgotten creature. "What is it doing?" Groban asked, his multiple eyes wide with fear. Alan shook his head. "It is waking, slowly. The humans designed it to wait, to sleep until it sensed intrusion, and now you are the intrusion." The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, they realized that they had misjudged humanity. They had assumed that humans were weak, primitive, and extinct. Now, standing in the presence of their ancient creations, they could see that they had underestimated a species that had thought far beyond them, planning for a future none of them could imagine. Outside, the planet was calm. The oceans shimmered under the light of a distant sun. Forests, deserts, and mountains lay silent, hiding the secrets beneath. The humans who had built these ships were gone, but their legacy remained, buried and waiting. Alan thought of the stories he had grown up with, of brave captains, daring explorers, and cunning engineers. He realized that those stories were not just entertainment. They were warnings, instructions, and promises. The first tremor had passed, but another followed. It was stronger this time, and the alien fleet shook under the force. One of the smaller scout ships was toppled by a sudden surge of energy, and alarms blared across the alien ships. "Evacuate! Evacuate!" shouted Chiron, panic rising in his voice. Alan stood still. He was not afraid. He knew what was coming. The humans had planned for this moment, and their fleet had been designed to survive. The aliens had triggered something they did not understand. They had stepped into a trap of time, a trap that had waited 500,000 years. Deep beneath the surface, the ship's systems continued to awaken. Lights blinked, reactors hummed, and long-dormant weapon systems came online. The network of ships communicated silently, exchanging signals that no alien could decipher. The humans had built their fleet to be independent, but also intelligent. It would not attack immediately, but it would observe, measure, and prepare. Alan knew that the aliens would not understand this. They had thought in terms of immediate threats and responses. The humans had thought in terms of centuries, millennia, and even longer. They had planned for a galaxy that had forgotten them, for enemies who assumed they were gone, and for the moment when curiosity would awaken the sleeping giant. As the tremors shook the ground again, the aliens began to retreat, confusion and fear in their movements. Some tried to communicate with the ships, but there was no response. The fleet did not yet recognize them as enemies. It only recognized that someone was there and that it had been disturbed. Alan watched quietly, a small smile on his face. He knew the aliens would not understand the lesson of Earth, not yet. The humans had left the galaxy a message, written not in words but in steel, energy, and time. Never assume death means the end. Never assume absence means weakness. Humanity had waited. Humanity had survived. And now humanity's legacy was beginning to wake. Outside, the winds of a long-dead world swept across the surface. The oceans were quiet, the forests untouched, and the deserts still. But beneath it all, deep and silent, the human war fleet stirred, sensing a galaxy that had forgotten it. And Alan knew that this was only the beginning. The aliens had come thinking they would find nothing. Instead, they had awakened a force that would change everything. The sky darkened with the alien fleet preparing to depart. They moved quickly, hoping to escape whatever force they had just disturbed. But Alan knew it was too late. The humans had planned for this moment. Their machines were waking, their systems were alive. Their legacy was no longer just history, it was presence. As the last alien ship lifted off, Alan felt a strange pride. Humanity was gone, but not forgotten. Their intelligence, their foresight, and their determination were still alive in the machines they had built. The galaxy might think of humans as extinct, but Alan knew the truth. Humans were patient, cunning, and prepared. And now, after 500,000 years, the galaxy would remember them again. The hum of the awakening ships filled the hidden chambers beneath the planet. It was a sound like no other, a slow, powerful heartbeat that had waited for centuries. Alan listened to it quietly, knowing that the future had already begun, and that no one, alien or otherwise, would ever forget humanity again. The alien fleet had retreated above the planet, moving in disorganized clusters as if the humans' old systems had made them nervous. Alan Brooks stayed close to the awakening ships, his eyes fixed on the faint lights that were now spreading across the hulls. The small ship that had first stirred now glowed steadily, and the vibration in the ground had become stronger. Each hum felt like a living heartbeat, slow but powerful. "It is not moving fast," said Groban, still trembling. "It is just waking. What will it do?" Alan shook his head. "Humans do not move without purpose. They wait, they plan, and they act when the time is right. What you are seeing is only the start." The aliens tried to communicate with the vessels. They sent signals, pulses, and codes. They hoped to turn the machines off or at least understand their purpose. The ships did not respond. Instead, faint lights traced patterns on their hulls, a silent language no alien had ever seen. Alan leaned closer, reading what he could. It was subtle, but he could understand it. The ships were scanning, mapping, calculating. They were learning. One of the larger vessels began to shift slowly. It was buried deep beneath the crust, but it pushed against the earth with enormous power. Rocks cracked, dust billowed, and a deep rumble rolled across the surface. The aliens froze, their sensors registering the impossible. A 500,000-year-old machine, larger than anything they had ever built, was moving on its own. "Retreat!" shouted Admiral Chiron, panic in his voice. The aliens began lifting off, trying to put distance between themselves and the awakening war fleet. But Alan held his ground, fascinated by the machine's precision. The vessels on the surface began to connect with each other. Energy lines ran between them, forming a network that spanned continents. Each ship knew the other's position, and they began to coordinate. It was as if the humans had designed them to work together, even after 500,000 years of silence. "Look at that," Alan said softly. "They are linking. Humans always planned for teamwork. Even their machines work as a single mind." One of the alien scouts tried to approach a smaller ship. It hovered cautiously, sending out scans. The ship responded, and suddenly the scout's instruments went dark. The alien crew panicked. The vessel had blocked the scan, protecting itself with a technology that no alien had ever seen. "What is it doing?" Groban shouted. It is controlling our instruments," Alan nodded. "Humans did not want their machines disturbed. They built protections like this. It is smart enough to defend itself." The largest vessel, buried beneath the crust, finally broke the surface. A mountain of metal rose slowly from the ground, shaking the earth as it moved. Dust and rocks fell away, revealing weapons, hull plating, and engines that glimmered even under the pale sunlight. The aliens gasped. They had never imagined anything like it. "We need to leave," said Chiron, his voice trembling. "This is not a relic. It is alive." Alan smiled faintly. He had expected this reaction. Humans had always been underestimated. They had planned for a time when the galaxy would forget them, and now their machines were showing the aliens that forgetting humanity was a mistake. The war fleet continued to awaken. Smaller ships lifted from hidden chambers, their engines humming with power. They scanned the aliens, learning their positions, their weapons, and their intentions. The aliens tried to move quickly, but the human ships were faster, smarter, and more precise than anything in the galaxy. One of the alien vessels fired a warning shot, a small missile aimed at a human scout ship. The missile exploded harmlessly against an invisible shield. The shield shimmered, a thin barrier of light that had appeared moments before the impact. Alan watched, fascinated. Humans had built this defense long before anyone could imagine it, and it still worked perfectly. "They are too advanced," said Groban, his multiple eyes wide. This is impossible, Alan shook his head. Nothing is impossible for humans who plan for the future. They knew the galaxy would forget them, and they made sure it would never be easy to attack them. The aliens tried to retreat further, but the human fleet blocked their path. Ships moved into orbit silently, coordinating without communication the aliens could understand. They did not attack yet, but their presence was a warning. Any sudden move by the aliens would trigger a response. Alan turned to watch a smaller vessel lifting from the ocean floor. It moved with grace, water cascading off its hull. The engines left trails of energy that shimmered in the sunlight. It hovered for a moment, scanning the alien fleet. Then it returned to the surface, joining the others. The human ships were no longer scattered relics. They were a formation, a fleet that could act as one. Humans built this for a reason, Alan said quietly. It was not meant to attack immediately. It was meant to wait. It was meant to teach a lesson. The aliens could feel it. The air seemed heavier, the light sharper, and even the wind felt strange as the fleet awakened. It was as if the planet itself recognized the presence of these ancient machines. The aliens whispered among themselves, fear and awe mixing in their voices. Chiron tried to issue orders. Keep scanning, find a way to deactivate them. This is a mistake. Alan shook his head. You cannot deactivate them. Humans built them to survive everything, even time itself. What you see here is only a fraction of their design. They can adapt, learn, and protect themselves. Attacking them now would be foolish. One of the smaller alien ships tried again to approach a human vessel. It was immediately surrounded by a field of energy, and the ship's systems went offline. The aliens panicked. Every move they made was anticipated, every action countered. The human fleet was awake, and it was not yet angry, but it was ready. Alan watched as the largest vessel began to move again, this time toward the orbiting alien fleet. Its engines glowed, sending energy waves across the planet. The aliens could feel the power of the ship, a force that dwarfed their own technology. They realized too late that they had underestimated humanity. "They are huge," said Groban. "Look at the size of that ship." Alan nodded. Humans built for survival, not for comfort. They made things that last, that can withstand anything. Size is just part of it. The real power is in their planning and intelligence. The aliens tried to flee. Their fleet scattered in all directions, but the human ships did not chase. They simply blocked paths, creating a wall of metal and energy that no alien could penetrate. The humans were waiting, observing, and learning. Alan could feel it in the subtle vibrations of the machines. They were aware, calculating, patient. Hours passed, and the aliens grew more desperate. They tried to communicate again, sending messages in every language they knew. The human fleet ignored them. Alan could see the patterns in the lights and energy flows. This was intentional. The humans wanted the aliens to understand their mistake but not yet punish them. "Why are they not attacking?" Groban asked. "They could destroy us all," Alan smiled faintly. "Because humans do not attack without reason. They are not reckless. They plan and they act at the right moment. Right now, they are teaching you a lesson in patience. Do not mistake restraint for weakness." The aliens realized they could do nothing. Their ships were small, fragile, and outdated compared to the machines that had awakened. Every attempt to approach, scan, or threaten the human fleet was blocked. Every action was anticipated. They were trapped not by force, but by intelligence. Alan walked slowly among the smaller ships that had emerged from the ocean and underground chambers. The air was filled with the hum of energy, a sound like a heartbeat multiplied across the planet. He could feel the power in his chest, a steady rhythm that reminded him of the humans who had built these machines. They had been gone for 500,000 years, but their legacy lived on. The aliens began to retreat further, moving beyond the system to escape the human fleet's awakening. But Alan knew they would not forget. The humans had left a message, written not in words, but in steel, energy, and time. Never assume death is defeat. Never assume absence is weakness. The galaxy would remember humanity, even if humanity itself was gone. As night fell over the shattered Earth, the human fleet continued to organize. Ships rose from hidden chambers, engines glowing, systems coming online. They formed patterns in the sky, a silent network of power and intelligence. Alan watched quietly, knowing that this was only the beginning. The aliens would leave, but they would carry fear with them. The humans had waited, planned, and survived. Even in absence, they were present. Even in death, they were alive through the machines they had built. The galaxy might have forgotten humanity, but humanity had not forgotten itself. Alan looked at the largest vessel rising into the sky. It glimmered under the pale sun, a monument to a species that had refused to vanish. He felt a sense of pride, quiet and steady. Humans had built this fleet for a reason. They had built it to last, to teach, and to protect. The aliens had thought they would find nothing, but instead they had awakened a power that no one could ignore. He knew the future would be difficult. The aliens would return, and they would come with more ships, more weapons, more arrogance. But Alan also knew the humans had planned for this. The fleet would adapt, protect itself, and respond when the time was right. The galaxy might believe humans were gone, but Alan knew the truth. Humans were patient, intelligent, and dangerous, even after 500,000 years. As the first stars appeared in the sky, the human fleet hovered silently, waiting, observing, and preparing. Alan stood among them, feeling the hum of the machines through the ground and into his bones. The lesson was clear, even to those who refused to understand. Never underestimate humanity, even when it is gone. The galaxy was about to learn that the humans' legacy was alive, and it would not be ignored. The human fleet hovered silently over the planet, its immense size and perfect coordination leaving the aliens in stunned silence. Alan Brooks stood among the smaller vessels, watching the light pulse along their hulls. Every ship seemed to breathe, as if alive, and the hum of energy was like a chorus of whispers from a long-forgotten past. Alan could feel it in his chest, the intelligence of a species that had planned for a time no one else could imagine. "They are everywhere," Groban said, his voice trembling. "It is like they are one being spread across all these ships." Alan nodded. "They are connected. Humans designed them to work together. Every ship knows what the others are doing. They coordinate without words, without signals that you can understand. It is how they survive." The aliens tried to regroup. Admiral Chiron barked orders, sending ships in different directions, hoping to confuse the fleet. But the human ships anticipated every movement. Tiny scouts would rise from hidden chambers, intercepting alien probes before they reached their targets. Energy fields blocked every weapon the aliens fired. The humans did not attack. They did not need to, but their presence alone was enough to force retreat and hesitation. Alan moved closer to the largest vessel. It was buried deep in the crust, but had broken the surface now, rising like a silver mountain. Lights traced strange patterns along its sides, glowing softly, as if it were aware of every alien ship in orbit. Alan placed his hand on the hull. The vibrations ran through him, steady and powerful. He felt the intelligence within the machine, calculating, observing, remembering. "What is it thinking?" Groban asked, fear in his voice. Alan smiled faintly. "It is not thinking like you think, it is learning. Humans built it to survive time, to survive war, and to survive themselves. It remembers what humanity feared, what humanity planned, and it will act only when it is necessary. Right now, it is watching you." Deep beneath the planet, more ships stirred. Massive engines hummed, releasing energy into the empty spaces of old ocean trenches and buried valleys. Long dormant weapon systems came online, but there was no fire. There was only readiness. Alan could read it in the subtle vibrations. The fleet knew the aliens were here, it knew their power, and it calculated that the humans' plan was still ahead, waiting for the right moment. How could humans have planned this?" Groban asked. "They are gone. They cannot even be alive. How can their ships be alive?" Alan shook his head. Humans thought far beyond their time. They knew they might disappear. They knew that other species might forget them or think them weak. So they built a fleet that could last, that could protect their legacy, and that could respond long after humanity itself was gone. "You are seeing the result of 500,000 years of planning." The aliens moved closer again, trying to probe the fleet's systems. A group of them hovered above the largest ship, sending sensors and scanners into its hull. The ship did not attack. Instead, its lights traced complex patterns across the hulls of nearby vessels. Energy lines connected the ships, forming a network that spanned continents and oceans. The aliens realized that every probe they sent was immediately detected and countered. The fleet was aware of every action. Alan could hear their fear. The aliens were beginning to understand that this was not just a collection of machines. This was a defense system, a memory of a species that had refused extinction. The human fleet was a monument, a warning, and a guardian all in one. "Why do they not destroy us?" Groban asked. Alan smiled faintly. Because humans do not attack without reason. They do not strike out of fear. They strike with purpose. They are waiting to see what you do next. The humans who built these ships left instructions, strategies, and protocols that even you cannot understand. Right now, you are being measured, tested, and recorded. The fleet will act only when it is necessary. The aliens realized their mistake. They had assumed that Earth was a dead world, that humanity was gone, and that nothing here could challenge them. Now they could see the truth. Humans had prepared for this. They had built machines that would awaken when disturbed. They had planned for a future no one else could imagine. The aliens were not facing the remains of a species. They were facing a legacy that had waited patiently for 500,000 years. Alan watched as one of the smaller ships lifted from a hidden underwater hangar. It moved with grace, the engines glowing faintly as it hovered over the surface. The aliens tried to target it, but the vessel responded instantly, deploying shields and subtle energy fields that blocked every attack. The ship moved with intelligence, anticipating every move the aliens made. Alan could almost hear the thoughts embedded in its systems. "You were warned." The largest vessel shifted slightly, adjusting its position. Energy flowed along its hulls, connecting it to every smaller ship. The ground trembled and the aliens felt the power in their bones. They were no longer in control. They had underestimated a species they believed extinct. Alan thought of the stories he had read, of the humans who had built these ships. He thought of captains who had sailed the stars, engineers who had designed weapons that could survive time itself, and strategists who had planned for futures none could foresee. The fleet was the culmination of all that knowledge. It was more than machines. It was a message, a warning, and a legacy. One of the alien vessels tried a risky maneuver. It flew close to the largest ship, attempting to disable a part of its system. A sudden pulse of energy ran along the hull, and the alien ship was thrown back. Alarms blared, and the aliens realized that the fleet was not just defending, it was learning. Every action they took was recorded, analyzed, and countered in real time. "They are adapting," Groban whispered. "They are learning faster than we can think," Alan nodded. "Humans built them to do that. Their machines remember, calculate, and respond. This is how humanity survives even after extinction. They do not need to be alive. Their intelligence, their strategy, and their foresight live in these ships." The aliens tried to regroup, moving farther away from the planet. But the human fleet anticipated their path. Ships rose from buried hangars and sunken trenches, blocking escape routes. Energy shields flashed, and faint vibrations ran through the alien ships as the fleet projected its presence across the surface. Alan could feel it. The humans had planned for intruders, for enemies, and for the day when curiosity would awaken their fleet. The aliens were intruders and the fleet was ready. "They will never forget us," Groban said, fear in his voice. Alan shook his head. "They do not need to attack to make their point. Humans are patient. They built these ships to survive time, and now you are learning why. Your fear is part of the lesson. The humans who built this fleet wanted it to be remembered. They wanted the galaxy to respect them, even if they themselves were gone." Deep beneath the surface, the fleet continued to awaken. Massive engines roared to life, sending energy through the hidden corridors of old cities, long-buried factories, and deserted hangars. Weapons systems calibrated themselves, but there was still no fire. The fleet was aware of every alien action, but it waited. It was patient. It was calculating. It was human. Alan moved closer to one of the vessels, feeling the vibration in his chest. He could sense the intelligence within, the quiet awareness that had waited for centuries. The humans had not built these machines to die. They had built them to last, to survive, and to protect their legacy. And now, after 500,000 years, the galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had been planning this moment all along. The aliens realized the scale of their mistake. They had come thinking they would find ruins, abandoned ships, and nothing of value. Instead, they found a fleet designed to outlast civilizations, a network of intelligence and power that no alien race could easily challenge. They had underestimated humans, and now they were paying the price in fear, confusion, and hesitation. Alan watched as the largest vessel adjusted its position again. The sun glinted off its hull, casting light across the oceans and mountains. Every ship, every engine, every weapon system was alive with energy. The fleet did not attack, but its presence was enough to make the aliens retreat further. The humans had built a force that required no orders, no captain, and no crew. It operated independently, intelligently, and patiently. "This is incredible," Groban said, barely able to speak. "They are everywhere, connected, alive." Alan nodded. Humans were never ordinary. They planned for the impossible, built for the impossible, and survived where others would have failed. This fleet is proof of that. You are seeing a species that refused to vanish, even when the universe thought it was gone. As night fell over the shattered world, the human fleet remained awake, vigilant, and patient. It was more than machines. It was strategy, intelligence, and foresight embodied in steel and energy. The aliens had seen the power, but they had not yet understood the mind behind it. Alan knew that the lessons were only beginning, and that the galaxy would soon remember humanity in ways no one could ignore. The humans had been gone for 500,000 years, but their legacy was alive. Their fleet was awake, learning, and waiting. And Alan knew that when the time came, the fleet would act with precision, intelligence, and power far beyond anything the aliens had ever imagined. Humanity might be absent, but it had left a mark on the galaxy that would never be erased. Alan looked at the sky, at the enormous ships hovering silently, and felt a quiet sense of pride. The humans who had built these machines had thought far beyond their time. They had planned for the distant future, for enemies they could never see, and for a galaxy that would forget them. And now their fleet was awake, and the galaxy would never forget them again. The alien fleet was scattered across the outer orbit of the solar system, trying desperately to regroup. Fear ran through their crews like fire through dry grass. They had come expecting ruins, empty machines, and nothing that could challenge them. Instead, they had awakened a power older, smarter, and more dangerous than they could imagine. Alan Brooks watched quietly from a smaller vessel hovering near the awakening ships. The hum of energy running through the fleet was constant, like the pulse of a living thing. "They are not attacking," Groban said, still trembling. "Why do they just wait?" Alan shook his head. "Humans never attack without reason. They observe, they calculate, and they act with purpose. You are seeing the restraint of a species that thought far beyond your understanding." The largest vessel, a massive ship that had broken the surface from deep beneath the crust, began a slow, deliberate movement. Lights traced along its hull, spreading energy patterns to the other ships in the fleet. Smaller vessels rose from buried oceans, deserts, and ice-covered lands, all moving to form a network, a web of intelligence that spanned the planet. Alan could see the coordination, the silent communication, and the awareness that reached far beyond the planet. "What are they doing now?" Groban asked, his voice barely audible. Alan watched carefully. The fleet was transmitting signals, pulses of energy that spread across the system. They were not targeting weapons or ships, they were speaking. The signals carried information in 1,000 forms, some digital, some energetic, some encoded in patterns that no alien technology could fully understand. It was a message, a warning, a lesson written in the language of machines. What is the message?" Groban asked. Alan smiled faintly. "Humans do not speak in words alone, they speak in strategy and action and in presence. Their message is simple: we are here, we are aware. Do not mistake absence for weakness." The alien admirals struggled to understand what they were seeing. Their systems, the best in the galaxy, were being tested by forces they could not perceive. Every probe, every scan, every attempt to communicate was anticipated and countered. The fleet's network adjusted instantly, spreading its awareness and reinforcing its defenses. The aliens were beginning to understand that they were not facing empty machines, they were facing a legacy. Alan activated a small console in his vessel, translating what he could from the fleet's transmissions. It was a simple warning, but its meaning was immense. Any species that dared to disturb this world or challenge the human fleet would face annihilation. The humans were gone, but their will, intelligence, and power remained. "It is a warning," Groban said, awe in his voice. "They do not attack, but they are ready to destroy us if we do anything wrong." Alan nodded. "Exactly. Humans do not waste power. They plan, they wait, and they act when necessary. You are seeing the result of 500,000 years of preparation. They have designed a force that will protect their legacy long after they themselves are gone." The aliens began to retreat further, moving out of the solar system. They communicated urgently among themselves, trying to coordinate a safe withdrawal. But even as they left, the presence of the human fleet followed them. The ships projected energy fields and subtle signals that mapped the aliens' paths, recording every movement, every intention. Alan knew the aliens would carry this lesson for the rest of their lives. "Will they follow us?" Groban asked. Alan shook his head. "Not yet. The humans are patient. They only act when necessary. Right now they are warning you, not punishing you. But you will not forget this. No one will." As the night fell over Earth, the fleet continued to organize. Ships rose from hidden valleys, oceans, and mountains, forming a network that covered the planet like a silver web. Their engines glowed softly, their weapons systems came online, and their shields shimmered in the pale sunlight. Alan could feel the intelligence of the fleet, a mind spread across thousands of machines, all working as one. The aliens, far above the planet, tried to send messages again. They begged for communication, for explanation, for mercy. The fleet ignored them. It did not need to speak. Its presence alone conveyed the message. The humans had built a system that transcended words, a system that demanded respect, caution, and understanding. Alan moved to the largest vessel, feeling the vibration of its engines through the ground and into his chest. The ship was aware, alive in a way no alien could comprehend. It had waited for this moment, and now it had proven the humans' foresight. The species might be gone, but their legacy had not just survived. It had thrived in the silence, in the waiting, in the preparation for a future none could foresee. "Will they attack eventually?" Groban asked. Alan shook his head. "Humans act when it is necessary. They do not strike out of anger, fear, or pride. They strike with purpose. Right now the galaxy is being warned. That is enough. The humans do not need to destroy to make their point." The alien fleet continued its retreat, and the system grew quiet once more. But Alan knew that the humans' presence would remain. The fleet would observe, record, and prepare for the day when action might be necessary. It was a living legacy, a silent guardian, and a warning to all who thought humanity could be forgotten. As dawn broke over the planet, the human fleet settled into orbit and surface positions, not attacking but fully alert. Smaller vessels hovered silently above oceans, deserts, and mountains, while larger ships maintained positions above strategic points on the crust. Energy lines connected the ships, forming a web that transmitted intelligence instantly across the fleet. Alan could feel the power, the calculation, and the patient awareness that had waited 500,000 years. "They are incredible," Groban said softly. "Even gone, they are stronger than anything we know." Alan nodded. "That is the way humans always planned. They built not for the present, but for the future. They prepared for enemies they could not see, for time they would not live to witness. And now, after 500,000 years, they are teaching the galaxy a lesson that no one will forget." Far beyond the solar system, alien ships continued to scatter, sending urgent reports back to their civilizations. Every message carried the same warning: Earth is not empty, humans are not gone, and the legacy of this species is alive and ready. No one who had witnessed the awakening could ever underestimate humanity again. Alan looked down at the planet, at the fleet that had risen from dust, water, and rock. He could see the light pulsing along the hulls, connecting every ship in a network that was more than metal. It was memory, strategy, and intelligence. The humans had built for survival, for knowledge, and for the long future. The aliens had come expecting ruins, but they found the full proof of human foresight. "Do you think they will ever leave us alone?" Groban asked. Alan smiled faintly. "They do not need to attack to protect themselves. This fleet is their will, their mind, and their plan. They will observe, wait, and act only if it is necessary. The galaxy will remember humanity because of what you have seen today. Absence does not mean weakness, and death does not mean the end. The humans have proven that." As the sun rose higher in the sky, the fleet adjusted its positions, covering the planet and surrounding space. Energy patterns traced along the hulls of the ships, and subtle pulses transmitted warnings across the system. The message was clear. Humanity may be gone, but it had left a presence that demanded respect, caution, and careful thought. The aliens had been warned, and the lesson would spread across the galaxy. Alan moved along the hull of one of the smaller ships, feeling the vibrations, the pulse, and the intelligence that filled it. He thought of the humans who had built these machines, who had planned for centuries, and who had left a legacy that could survive 500,000 years. They were gone, but their minds, their foresight, and their strategy lived on in the fleet. The aliens had retreated far enough to escape immediate danger, but Alan knew they would carry the memory of this encounter forever. The humans had not attacked, but the power, coordination, and intelligence of the fleet had left a mark on their minds. Any civilization that underestimated humanity in the future would learn the same lesson. The galaxy will never forget them, Groban said quietly, awe in his voice. Even after 500,000 years, they are still human. Alan nodded. That is the truth. The humans did not just survive, they built a legacy that cannot be ignored. Their presence will be felt, their intelligence remembered, and their power respected. The galaxy will learn that humans are patient, cunning, and dangerous, even after they are gone. As night fell once again over Earth, the fleet remained vigilant. Ships hovered over oceans, deserts, and mountains. Energy flowed between them, connecting the entire system in a web of awareness. Alan could feel the heartbeat of the fleet, steady, powerful, and patient. The humans had waited for this moment, and now their legacy was awake. The aliens were gone from immediate orbit, but the planet remained alive with human power. Signals continued to transmit, a silent message across the galaxy. The humans had built not just machines, but a warning, a legacy, and a presence that would endure beyond time. Alan knew the lesson had been delivered. Humanity cannot be forgotten, even when it sleeps. And so the fleet waited, patient, powerful, and aware. The humans may have vanished from the stars, but their presence remained, a living reminder that intelligence, strategy, and foresight could survive anything, even 500,000 years of absence. Alan looked at the sky one last time, at the ships pulsing with energy, connected and alive. He smiled faintly. The humans had planned for this, they had waited for this, and they had proven that even in absence, they were not weak, not gone, and not to be underestimated. The galaxy would remember humanity, because humanity had never truly left. The stars shone over the solar system, but now, amidst them, one truth was clear. Humans had returned not in body, but in mind, machine, and legacy. The galaxy would never forget again. 500,000 years after, aliens discover Earth's dormant war fleet.